Hi, this is John Hand, and on this episode of Sci-Fi Showcase, we're going to cover a classic, a very influential piece of sci-fi, which doesn't strike many people as influential, and it's kind of sad because before Michael Myers, before The Terminator, there was Yul Brynner as the gunslinger in Michael Crichton's 1973 film Westworld.
MGM presents Westworld.
Attention, please. We will soon be landing at Westworld, the ultimate resort.
We have you on grid 5, over.
It consists of 3 worlds of the past.
Locking in now.
Worlds where you can live out your every fantasy. There's Roman world, the lusty, decadent delights of imperial Pompeii.
Notify ground crews.
Medieval world, chivalry and combat in 13th century Europe. And Westworld, lawless violence on the American frontier of the 1880s.
Bacon, cinnamon toast.
Each resort is maintained by reliable computer technology and peopled by lifelike robot men and women.
Let's stand by for resort activation. Ready on 6, on 5, on 4, on 3, on 2. Activate now.
Robots are programmed to provide you with an unforgettable vacation.
Dinner at 7, breakfast at 6:30. Get lunch on your own. Don't look like much here, but we have everything.
You mean to tell me he's a robot?
What'll it be?
Vodka martini on the rocks with a twist of lemon. Very dry, please.
Just give him whiskey. He's new in town.
Many elements of the Delos resort are potentially dangerous. That's part of the appeal.
Go on.
You say something, boy.
Kill him.
Your move.
Our technology is designed to provide all this in complete safety. In Westworld, frustrations find release. Desire ends in satisfaction.
Let me handle it.
And all in a controlled environment.
That's not supposed to happen.
We know you'll enjoy your stay in Westworld,
Hold it.
the ultimate resort,
Let me do it this time.
where nothing can possibly go wrong.
I'm shot.
Go wrong.
Raw.
Go
Oh,
wrong.
my God.
Shut down. Shut down immediately.
Westworld from MGM, starring Yul Brynner, Richard Benjamin, and James Brolin. Westworld, the ultimate resort. Boy, do we have a vacation for you, for you, for you, for you.
Now, the film takes place in the not too far future where there is this resort called Delos, and Delos is the resort to end all resorts. It is actually 3 parks. It's Roman world, medieval world, and Westworld. And these 3 parks make up Delos, which is this kind of Disney-fied resort. For $1,000 a day, you can experience what it was like in medieval times with the kings and castles and knights and all this kind of stuff. Or you can go to Roman world and have this kind of Roman bacchanal. Or you can go to Western world and see an authentic 1880s Western with stagecoaches and bank robberies and shootouts and all this kind of stuff. And all of these resorts are not populated by humans, they're actually populated by robots, which you can have sex with, robots which you can kill, robots which you can talk to, lifelike robots which are so real you really can't tell them apart from the humans, the actual, resort goers. They have a few defects. They haven't perfected their hands, the palms of their hands specifically. They kind of look a little weird, and their eyes have this kind of weird metallic tint at times. But overall, It's the perfect resort, the safest, most secure, kind of Disney-fied resort, except there begin to become problems. The machines start to kind of break down, and they begin to experience what the technicians running the resort are calling central failures, where basically the robots aren't doing what they're programmed to. And eventually, by the end of the film, the resort kind of falls into chaos. The film begins on the hovercraft, which takes you to Delos, which we're supposed to believe is in the middle of the desert, as our two specific resort guests that we follow, played by Richard Benjamin and James Brolin, are going to Westworld, or Western World, as it's described in the orientation movie that they see on the hovercraft, which James Brolin doesn't want to see because he's already been there before. And James Brolin is dragging his friend Richard Benjamin, who's a lawyer from Chicago who's kind of suffering from a recent divorce, and just taking his friend there to have some fun. So anyway, the movie is called Westworld, and so medieval world and Roman world kind of get the short shrift. Our main focus is Westworld and James Brolin and Richard Benjamin, and they suit up and they go into this, and they come to town. They ride into town via stagecoach, and they're just hanging out and having a ball. They're just like little kids, they're cowboys and Indians. And they meet this gunslinger in the saloon, played by Yul Brynner. Yul Brynner, who's looking just like he walked out of the Magnificent Seven, famous actor, famous iconic actor, and he plays this gunslinger who engages Richard Benjamin. Richard Benjamin shoots him. Throughout the film, Richard Benjamin shoots him again. And so Richard Benjamin is having a fun, wonderful time here at the resort here, just shooting, killing, and he goes to the saloon and spends the night with one of the robot prostitutes, who is, oh my God, probably one of the prettiest robot prostitutes I've ever seen. I still remember watching this on VHS years ago and just, oh man, oh my, she was good. This film is pretty much a G-rated film, PG. There's no real nudity. There is some violence because we see the gunslinger get killed. We see murders. But still, she was just a looker. So Brolin and Benjamin are having a great time. There's also a cute little cameo, small performance by Dick Van Patten, who plays this banker, who's all shy and weird. And the film climaxes with this really incredible 20-minute sequence of the gunslinger basically chasing Richard Benjamin through all of these theme parks. He escapes Westworld, goes into Roman world, and then eventually makes his way into medieval world. And as this relentless killer just keeps, chasing after him. And as the park just goes berserk and the robots just go nuts. So that's basically the film in a nutshell. 88 minutes of really tight, wonderful storytelling and exquisite filmmaking. This 1973 MGM film kind of encapsulates everything I loved about 70s film. The mood, the style, the tone, the storytelling. To me, and MGM had that. I mean, they had everything from 2001: A Space Odyssey, well, that's 68, to, Rollerball, to Westworld. I mean, this is kind of like the Soylent Green, the iconic, set of sci-fi films made by Warner Brothers and MGM. Some great, just wonderful little films. And to me, Westworld has kind of, it's in the history books, but I don't think it really gets the kind of praise that it deserves, because rewatching it, I was watching a recording from HDNet Movies. In HD, it's just a wonderful, wonderful film. It moves along at such a fast pace, at such a fast clip. And it has kind of engaging storytelling, and it's not as heavy-handed as a Soylent Green or some of the other films. It kind of, to me, gets in the range of more of a 2001, not on a really heavily stylistic level, but just on a level that it presents itself to. It's very experiential. The film is very much an experience, and you experience the film through the conduit of James Brolin and Richard Benjamin. And I thought that was really an excellent choice, as opposed to getting a Charlton Heston or having this big guy. I mean, really, James Brolin is kind of the big kind of action type guy in the film. But to have this kind of sensitive actor of romantic comedies, Richard Benjamin, play this character who you can really feel the pathos and the fear as he's just being, as he has to, something has to change within himself in order to fight for survival, really, at the end of this film, And all throughout the film, you're not really sure how to feel with these robots here who seem to be at your beck and call, who you can kill, who you can have sex with, and you kind of feel this kind of conflict and your own kind of engagement to the story and the characters in this vicarious way that cinema is, this vicarious exploration of other people's lives and these figures which are moving around for you. So Richard Benjamin kind of embodies that, and it's a really great role, and you just feel the kind of anger and tension. Westworld, the film, Michael Crichton. Let me back up a little bit and give you some information on the genesis of this film, and we'll go into the specific particulars of this resort, of this Westworld resort, because Michael Crichton, of course, the writer of the Andromeda Strain and the Terminal Man and Jurassic Park later on, you can see a lot of Jurassic Park in Westworld. You can see the germ of the idea of Jurassic Park in Westworld. And Westworld began with Michael Crichton going to Disney and seeing these animatronic figures, seeing Abraham Lincoln, the Gettysburg Address there, the figures of the Imagineers, and trying to take that the next step further and go, well, okay, what if there was a resort which had an even more advanced type of robotic technology? He says he tried to do it as a book. The book, it was more of a visual thing, though, because in Westworld, he deals with cliches and archetypes. The 1880s world of Westworld, it isn't the 1880s world of Westworld. It's the Hollywood Western view of the 1880s Wild West. It's literally the Wild West, or Gunsmoke, or Stagecoach. All of those films, it's that type of feel, of vibe. It feels very kind of theatrical, and it feels very much like a Western picture, really. At that point, the film is conceptually very weird because it's a sci-fi film, but then you have this big hunk of the film, which is primarily focused inside Westworld, and you don't see, it's not cowboys and aliens, it's not this intermingling of these elements. It becomes like a Western itself, and you almost catch yourself just, is this a Western or is this a sci-fi film? There's this long chunk of the film where at one point Richard Benjamin kills the gunslinger a second time, and he gets put in prison, and then James Brolin breaks him out, and they run and they ride out into the country, and there's some weird dialogue between Brolin and Benjamin where he's like, this is so real, I'm almost beginning to believe it, and it's to me, that was almost a surrogate for the audience. It's like this Western situation feels so real, I'm almost beginning to believe it's actually a Western, And then it brings us back when James Brolin actually gets bit by an animatronic snake, which again is another central failure. Again, another one of these robots acting out towards the guests. So the world of Westworld looks like a Hollywood Western. Michael Crichton was consciously doing that. He shot it like a Hollywood Western. And the medieval world and Roman world, just they don't get a lot of coverage. We're really focused on Westworld. In medieval world is just like basically 2 sets, maybe even just 1 set that was redressed multiple times. And Roman world is really, this is nothing. It's they shot it in the Harold Lloyd's gardens of his estate, the estate of famous silent filmmaker, actor Harold Lloyd, who was into some odd stuff. Yeah, Harold Lloyd was into photography. He was into 3D photography. He was into 3D nude cheesecake photography. And he shot a lot of pictures in this by this pool in this area here of nudes and cheesecake, and they published a book of it. It's very odd, very odd to think of Harold Lloyd, which is if you don't know who Harold Lloyd is, this silent film actor with the big round glasses who was always hanging off of the building and stuff, and but anyway, so. So the film, was done on a very, very low budget because he wrote it, he tried to write it as a book. It became a film because, again, he wanted to use these archetypes because that's how most people know of the medieval world or the Roman world or the Western. It's through movies. It's not through books or obviously through first-hand knowledge. It's through pop culture, through movies. If you're going to a resort, that's what you'd want to see, realistically. Michael Crichton had directed a TV movie based on one of his books. The Andromeda Strain had come out a little while before this, and I think there was some disagreements with Robert Wise, the director of Andromeda Strain, and I think he felt it was time to direct his own material. And, of course, Michael Crichton, who was such a young phenom at this point, he could do it. He tried to shop Westworld around to all the studios. Everyone except Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM, turned him down. And he got a very small budget from MGM. He got a little over $1 million. He got, a little over 30 days to shoot this film. It was done on a very tight schedule. Again, he had to shoot in the scenes in the Mojave Desert, the gardens in the Harold Lloyd estate, some sets on the MGM lot. He shot the film fast, came together very fast. Now, one of the groundbreaking aspects of this film, which is in the history books, is that Westworld had the first use of digitally processed imagery in a major feature film. And that was the POV, the heads-up display, the POV of the Yul Brynner robot as he is chasing Richard Benjamin at the end of the film. We see this kind of rough, pixelated bitmap, like some kind of 8-bit graphics of the scenery as he's chasing Richard Benjamin, and he has this infrared vision. Michael Crichton tried many photographic methods to get the robot vision. He wanted something purely digital, and he knew that at this point digital imagery was getting to a point where you could actually get that on film. Eventually, they settle on John Whitney Jr. and Gary Demos, who at that time were starting to work with a company called III, or Information International Incorporated, or something like that. They're mainly known as III. They're no longer, they're defunct, like a lot of the companies at that point. And they created this imagery, which was just, for its time, in this modern era, it's very simple, but for its time, it was just groundbreaking. It took them months and months and months to process this. And I've been trying to find some specific information about what they did, how specifically they pulled it off. I I'm sure there's a lot of proprietary software and hardware involved in that here, because John R. Whitney Jr., his father, John R. Whitney Sr., had been working with analog computers in the 1960s and doing this kind of computer-generated imagery for defense contractors and various private organizations. And what you have in Westworld is kind of the imagery itself is not that impressive, but the fact that it's there and the fact that it was the first is in itself kind of groundbreaking. And the film Westworld was in 1973. The first SIGGRAPH conference was in 1973 for computer-generated imagery. And so it was kind of the beginnings of these guys, John Whitney and Gary Demos and Triple I, and a number of other people kind of getting together. Ed Catmull, the people who eventually were to be involved in Pixar, and this is basically laying the groundwork for the digital imagery industry, pretty much, in the sense that a lot of people were getting together and the state of the art was getting to a point where they didn't have to just do this for defense or people with a seven-figure budget, that it could be done far cheaper and it actually could be done on the schedule needed for a film, and you could actually put this kind of imagery in a film. And so that was just a mind-blowing concept, and I can't imagine the audiences of 1973 how this kind of imagery must have looked. So speaking of the robot's vision, let's speak about the robot itself, because probably one of the most compelling images of this film is Yul Brynner. Yul Brynner as the robot with the contact lenses, which are 80% contact lenses, reflective, 80% reflective, where they could use lighting to stress the eyes, the weirdness of the eyes, because Michael Crichton wanted some way to suggest these robots, some kind of mechanical, otherworldly sense about them. It kind of reminds me of what had been done, a number of years later, well, really almost 10 years later, with Blade Runner, with the eyes, which kind of have that reddish tint to them, that have the red eye, which cinematographer Jordan Cronenweth got into the eyes in Blade Runner. In Westworld, it was actually done with a combination of contact lenses and lighting. In Blade Runner, it was completely lighting. But Yul Brynner, the star of Magnificent Seven, and he plays this android, this robot whose job is just to be killed. I think actually. During the making of Westworld, they did like most MGM films at that point, there was a promotional making of film, and there's a great little interview with Yul Brynner where he actually discusses his character as the gunslinger, which I thought was a really kind of a little fascinating snippet of audio, actually.
I've really got the classical Westerner played by a highly developed machine. Therefore, the reactions may not be necessarily human. Now, 3 times he gets severely damaged by the character that Dick Benjamin plays. And something goes wrong because the programming is so sophisticated that he finally cannot stand it to be constantly shot, and he starts killing. He starts repeating what his enemy did. Then he starts smiling. The closer he gets to killing, the more he starts feeling warmth and become more of a human being.
Okay, so that was Yul Brynner describing how he sees his character and his role. Another interesting thing that Yul Brynner touches on in that interview is, unlike some other robot films, there's always this strong sense of morality in them, the fact that the machines think they're human, or they want to be something, more than a machine, and they gain sentience, basically, that they become a kind of sentient life form. And Westworld doesn't really contain that. I think it's a much better film for that, in the sense that the audience is kind of left wondering exactly what caused these robots to go insane. Was the constant servitude to man? Was the fact that they're constantly having to die and be reborn every night? Is that what's causing them to go crazy? I mean, we're shown a big computer room, but we're never really, and we spend a lot of time here in the computer room with these technicians, and it's kind of funny because there's a lot of chatter in the room because they have everything's on closed circuit video cameras. They know everything that's going on in Westworld, and they're able to choreograph the robots' events, perfectly. But And then there's always some mundane chatter in the background about, oh, my dry cleaning, no, I want this, I want that sandwich, ordered for me. But we're never really given this idea that there is some kind of, intelligence running the place. One of the technicians running the resort kind of hints at that. He makes some allusions to that. He tells us that we're not even really sure what's going on with the robots, because some of these robots are so technically advanced that they were actually designed by other androids. They were designed by other programs. So these robots were actually designed by computers. They're so advanced that they don't even completely understand them. That's the only kind of illusion that we're given to, that somehow there might be some kind of sentient intelligence which is causing everything to go crazy and to cause havoc. I mean, the failures, or which are in the film, are described as central failures or central failure psychosis. It's described as something that's kind of spreading, that it started in Roman or medieval world, and it's kind of spreading between those two, and now it's infecting Westworld, like, say, an actual infection, or, say, a computer virus. So, in 1973, the idea of a computer virus, I'm sure that's very heady and probably before its time as well. So, again, that's another thing that just, on a conceptual level that Michael Crichton was figuring out really before that was even really happening. But beyond all of that technical mumbo jumbo and the big ideas which the film is aspiring toward, and all that cool stuff which you can think about and which is in the history books and all of this, to me the film is Richard Benjamin and Yul Brynner as this kind of, thoughtless, unpitying killer who will stop at nothing and who moves at such a slow pace for this Richard Benjamin who was like the Jamie Lee Curtis of who was just, fighting like mad for his life. And I've read various articles and things where John Carpenter was inspired by Westworld when he created Michael Myers, the unstoppable killer in Halloween. And you can really see that. You can see that Yul Brynner as this thoughtless, killer is just it's completely the prototype for Michael Myers. He seems to be completely one of the prototypes for James Cameron's Terminator. It's such an iconic idea, and I love the way that the film starts off with all these other characters. We see little vignettes of other people in medieval world and Roman world, but we're mainly focused on James Brolin and Richard Benjamin. And I never really felt those pieces of the film really kind of worked, especially the whole thing in medieval world with that older guy who was, I really was so happy when the Black Knight stabbed him in the gut. I really was like, I would have cheered if it was at a theater. I was like, my God, get rid of that guy. And we didn't really see a lot of Roman world because there isn't really much. There's a garden. That's all Roman world is. This film is a low budget film. So I love how it goes from these vignettes, all these other characters, this whole entire park, and then within the last 20 minutes it just breaks down. It's just two people, and it's just a fight for survival. It's such a direct cinematic dynamic with no dialogue. It's just just one guy wants to kill the other guy, you know, and this one guy is an unstoppable robot, can't be stopped, can't be killed because it's not alive, and this other guy who is just completely fleeing for his life, and even, you know, there are certain points where he tries to kill the robot. He throws hydrochloric acid in its face, and the robot's face bubbles up and boils. And, you know, really kind of vis-a-vis maybe a little bit of what was going on in Terminator there. Well, I guess it's what are you going to do with a robot? You've got to find some way to burn it or kill it or do something. And eventually, you know, he does get burnt up. Very fascinating how they did that melting flesh trick in this film, where they basically just you know, used ground up Alka-Seltzer in his pancake makeup that they put on his face, and then they had these tubes that were pumping out smoke. And so that's really is. It's just tubes with smoke and Alka-Seltzer, and you hit him with water, and his face starts to bubble. So that's some very kind of neat stuff there. And then the ending with Richard Benjamin, where he finds the young woman who's locked up in the cell, and he takes her out, and he's like tries to give her a drink of water, and she turns out she's a robot, and he short circuits her. And I always felt that was kind of leading up to, you know, doing something with water with Yul Brynner, you know. And I think there maybe was a bit of the scene which was cut. There were a number of minutes of Westworld which were edited out. I think there actually was a bank robbery in the film, which is now you just hear in the background, just alluded to. I think that ending was originally extended. I think there was another. I think the Westworld robot, actually, the gunslinger robot, actually, there was one more battle. There was one more fight. But I think the film as it stands now is just a great, wonderful film. You know, one thing I always noticed, a little detail that I always thought about was, okay, the park is supposed to be so super safe, you know. I mean, it's supposed to be so super safe, but they give the guests, you know, guns which have live ammunition in them. The guns have a sensor which is supposed to not fire at anything that's warm. So they can't kill anything that's living, apparently. But again, the idea of giving guests live ammunition and you know, let him have at it, it just seems. And then a bar fight where somebody could be hit over the head with a chair and completely mess themselves up for life. Seems like you still, when you went to Westworld, you probably would have to sign a hell of a legal agreement to get in the doors, you know. It seems like still a hell of a dangerous place, even without live ammunition, you know, all the fighting and stuff that's going on there. But anyway, I guess that's me thinking too much. And then, I mean, okay, the live ammunition is safe, but how do you keep the weaponry safe in the medieval world and Roman world, you know? You still got sharp daggers and that stuff. And then why is the black knives, if you were going to have sword fights and stuff, why would you have a sword which was sharp enough that it could puncture human skin? I mean, just obviously like the guns in Westworld, the knives in Roman world and medieval world should be so dull that you couldn't even slice bread with them. You know, it should be so dull that, you know, you couldn't hurt anybody with them. It just should be slabs of metal. But anyway, I guess for realism's sake, you know, they wanted to keep that. They wanted to keep the sharpness of the blades there, right? I guess so. Now, Westworld was a big success. The brass at MGM didn't have a lot of confidence in the film, because, you know, Michael Crichton was, you know, pretty much, he shot the film, you know, and cut it in camera, which is to say that he didn't have a lot of extra footage. And he came up with a cut which he hated. He came up with a second cut, which is a little bit better, and they showed it to MGM, and they authorized some additional shooting. And at that time, the imagery, the digital imagery from John Whitney was coming back. and the score was also being reworked. Another really super effective part of this film, and probably one of the things which really keeps it together, the glue which kind of, puts it all together, is this excellent score by Fred Karlin, which is, he alternately plays off the Western and medieval and Roman themes. At the same time, there is this kind of pulsing electronic background, which is so... I can't help but think the end of this film, which is just total, no dialogue, just total music and chase. If you listen to the theme and this kind of harried, kind of insistent type theme, it sounds very similar to the kind of thing that John Carpenter was doing at the end of Halloween. In fact, in some ways, it sounds identical. It's different notes, different music. That's John Carlin's is a big theme with just electronic music, and John Carpenter scores a much smaller theme, much smaller music, but it still works in that kind of same way. And also Fred Karlin does stuff throughout the score of these little music hits which kind of underline the idea that what you're looking at as a robot. You'll see the glint of this eye, of these mechanical silver eyes, and you have a little stinger there, which was very effective and put you within the context of this being a science fiction film, but not overtly so. So really excellent soundtrack that really kind of bounds it all together, along with the kind of excellent performance. Wonderful performance by Yul Brynner as the gunslinger. Probably the iconic element which you take away from this film is the gunslinger, and the moments where his face comes off and you see the circuitry beneath his face. Again, that's the big image from the poster as well. So Westworld came out. It did very well, and I don't think Michael Crichton was very crazy about doing a sequel, but the producers bought the sequel rights from Crichton, and they took it to AIP, and they made a film called Future World. And Future World is, in the sense that Westworld is a really A movie, in the sense that it has interesting themes, it has interesting ideas, it's conceptually something that's very new and fun and unique. Future World is a pure B movie. It's out on DVD, made on demand through MGM here in the United States. It's been released in Europe on Blu-ray. And rewatching that film, I take away with how much, like Westworld's like a Turner Classic Movies film, and Future World's like a TBS Nightflix type film. I don't know if people will kind of get the ideas, but I mean, it's like a late night cable type of junk food type film, really. It has some interesting effects. It has some interesting actors. I think it gets off. The film succeeds on the good graces of Peter Fonda and Blythe Danner as these two reporters who are trying to uncover the mystery of Delos. This film takes place 2 years after Westworld. Delos has been totally renovated, that every circuit, every part of the old Delos has been replaced. The guardrails are now firmly intact. And it's kind of like a political thriller where they're going to use these robots to replace political figures and take over the world, that type of thing. In some ways, I mean, Westworld was so low budget that, I mean, they were reusing corridors. They had to, at the end of the film, they redressed the corridors like 4 or 5 times. They're always running down the same corridors. They only were able to build half of the hovercraft, and then they couldn't even show the exterior of the hovercraft really because the model just failed on so many levels. You just really see the inside of the hovercraft and like part of its wing as it's moving over the land in this video footage. So, I mean, Future World, I can't say it really opened up the film because it was just shot on location in these kind of futuristic looking areas. And there's some good effects in Future World in keeping with the technical innovation with the digital imagery in Westworld. Future World had some of the first 3D modeling. in a film ever there. So that was really a productive thing. But overall, it strikes me as not a memorable film. You know, the only thing I take away from it is they keep having these iconic images of the androids with no face on them. To me, it just never really comes together in the way that the iconic manner in which the original Westworld kind of came together. And then there's this ridiculous little cameo by Yul Brynner as the gunslinger from the first film. He doesn't even show up in the film proper. He just shows up in this dream sequence, like Blythe Danner. We see her in an early scene, like slobbering over the gunslinger, and then she has this dream where she like meets the gunslinger, and then they're in bed. It's the most ridiculous way to wedge in Yul Brynner for some marquee value in this film, and that really is probably a reason to hate the film, for just shoving Yul Brynner into this garbage. So then there was a Westworld television series, which I think only went 5 episodes. I only think they broadcast 3 episodes. I'd actually never heard of that, but then with doing some research, I mean, a Westworld television series, you could think that they could work, but again, I don't really have any big interest in watching it when the original Westworld is just so iconic. So there it is, Westworld, a fun, iconic, important piece of 70s sci-fi, right next to Omega Man and Soylent Green and all of those great films of the 70s. It deserves its rightful place on the throne, so watch out for it.